Hey guys, this week, join my guest, Jens Pulver, the first UFC lightweight champion who's had some incredible matches like the trilogy with BJ Penn. Find out how he got into the sport, what the UFC was like way back at UFC 22 when he first started, and what he's up to now. Check it out. Well, on the podcast today is UFC legend, first UFC lightweight champion, and a guy with a crazy backstory, Jens Pulver. Jens, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Yeah, how you doing? Everything good?
Man, so far so good. Now that we got you on, there was a little hiccup with the time zone. But you're here now. You came through.
Yeah. Time zones, man. Central time kind of gets lost into the, the shuffle. Everybody talks about East Coast, West Coast. Well, hey, there's the Central, and I don't even want to mess with that Idaho Mountain Time. So
that's like Arizona has this one part where they don't change times when you're out there, and I'm like, that's smart. We should. I wish we could globally figure out a way to stay with that, because that does fuck you up when you're like, 3 p.m. East Coast, but I'm flying back west, and that's 2 p.m. on the East Coast, and it's a headache. But we're here now. We got you.
Yeah, and it always is the worst when you're coming back from. I think coming back from the West Coast to the East Coast is the worst, because then you have the 2 hours, and then if you have a delay, and then it's an entire day flying. Where if you're going the other direction, you can pretty much you land at the same time, and that you left on the East Coast. And
all those flights, man. When you fought in one championship, those flights overseas to like Singapore and Manila are just murderous. You get 30-hour flights. Your body is just wrecked. It has no idea what's going on. It thinks you're trying to commit a passive suicide. Like, what are you doing?
It does. Like, your body's like, you land and your body's like, yeah, no, it's 3 a.m. No, it's in the afternoon.
Yeah.
No,
go jog.
It's not nowhere near. Yeah. There's nowhere near in the afternoon. This is horrifying right now.
Well, before we get into your fighting career, I want to talk a little bit about, because as I was doing research for this episode, man, I mean, I know you growing up in the Midwest. I've known Pat and stuff and the guys you train with and watching you fight. But, I flipped through your book a little bit, and you got into fighting for some unique reasons. You had a really tumultuous childhood. Is that fair to say?
I had an abusive father without a doubt, and there were situations growing up, and it definitely fired up it definitely was one of the reasons why I got into fighting, because I was born, I was people always talk about they were baptized in fire and stuff like that. But like I said, when I was 5, I had a shotgun shoved down my throat, and my dad's like, choose who lives and who dies, and then decided I wasn't worth the bullets and beat me with the butt of the gun. So wow. I've kind of been baptized in fire. Beatings. I remember saying it after beating BJ Penn, and they had asked the question, when BJ had you mounted, he was punching you in the face and everything, were you worried? I was like, worried? Please. I go, my father's been punching me since I was a kid. I go, this wasn't nothing.
It's crazy.
That one kind of set up the situation, because he happened to be watching the fights, and it took him about, 4-5 hours to muster up the courage, whatever it was. And then he called. And so our conversation was, man, next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. And I just told him, look, this is a different day, partner. This is a different day. You don't want to do that to me. I go, please give me that blessing. You know what I'm saying? Please do me the favor. I'll end you so fast it'll make your head spin. But so we had this conversation. That was we had a long block of time, but that was one of the last times I'd spoke to him for a while.
So he called you after watching your BJ Penn fight?
Yeah, and I just told him. See, and the thing was, I kind of knew. And the reason why I said it, and I told him, the reason why I even said this, because I figured you were out there watching. And it's weird, because you always have this in the back of your head, right? I always had this in the back of my mind when I was younger. And like, I'll have to run. I could get into this story, which got me going. But anyway, I'm going to jump all over the place. But no, so I always had it in the back of my mind, because this is what used to drive me. One day I told him, I said, look, man, he beat me real bad in the bathroom. And I said, one day I'm going to get famous, and I'm going to tell everybody about you. I'm going to tell everybody what you did to me, what you did to my mother, and it was just a rough situation when I was probably about sophomore in high school. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. I had this chip on my shoulder, a lot of anger. And just in case he was watching, I made sure to say it. And then, like I said, when he called and he was all mad, I said, you know what? I go, I'll guarantee you were sitting out there. That's my boy. I made him tough. And I just said, hey, let me tell you something. He didn't do shit. Pardon my language. He didn't do nothing. My mother made me tough. I was raised by a badass woman who had to take care of me, my 2 brothers, and my sister. You were gone. You didn't do shit. I go, this ain't for you. Everything that I'm doing isn't for you. You don't get to watch this. You don't get to celebrate. You don't get to say, hey, I did. You didn't do shit. And that's basically what I told him when he called.
So was that a big driving factor in why you got into martial arts, was wanting to defend yourself from your father, or was it more just kind of some anger that you wanted to get out and have something to hit that was in a constructive fashion?
Now, one of the greatest people I know, Jack Van Tress, grew up, my mother, they grew up in Oregon down in Tillamook together. He's like, you got to get these boys into wrestling. We were three kids all real close together. We just roughhousing all the time. And he just said, we got to get these kids into wrestling. And I just loved it. I mean, I wasn't very good. I was the last one. My baby brother, Abel, well, actually, my middle brother, Dustin, was a natural right off the bat. This kid he was winning everything down in Oregon, especially. He was winning everything. And then my baby brother, he started doing really well. And it wasn't until about my freshman, I started doing okay, but my freshman year going into my sophomore year is when I just decided to just turn it up and become a beast. I was a late bloomer, but I think what it was I fell in love with that one-on-one aspect where it's like the greatest way of showing your mother, your coaches, your friends, your family, how much you love and appreciate, but just going out there and giving it 100%. I was on a team. I wasn't on a team trying to be an individual. I was an individual trying to be on a team. And I fell in love with that aspect, meaning I'm going to have to go out there. And at one point, I'm going to have to represent everybody and all the training, everything I've done by myself, right? And most people you see on a team sport, they're ripping their helmet off, trying to do whatever they can in the media, anything that they can do to stand out, But see, there's a difference in this individual sport. You're gonna stand out there, and you're gonna just be in a singlet, a pair of shorts, some boxing gloves, whatever it is. But it's just you, and that's the only way that you can show your friends, your family, your coaches, everybody how hard you train is just by going out there and putting on a great effort. So you're an individual trying to be on a team, and I just fell in love with that aspect as a kid.
So was the wrestling what led you into more of the mixed martial arts, the boxing, or how did you start getting your hands together?
Well, that was it. I just after Dwayne Ludwig knocked me out, that's when I really knew I needed to start working on my hands. But before that, yeah, no, I was just that same kid, man. I could just, I would just try to punch. I just kind of bear down with the rest of the wrestlers and everybody just swinging, and I think to be able to start when I started watching this and I started seeing like Randy Couture, Kevin Jackson, Townsend Saunders, all these people that I used to watch wrestling. I was like, oh, I was such a huge fan of wrestling. I was like, all right, this is where you can go because the Olympic level of wrestling, to make it in that wrestling, what I mean, in the wrestling world, it's such a finite spot. There's only so many spaces, no matter how good you are. Maybe you can make it as a coach or something like that. But I was like, I wasn't that good of a wrestler. I was decent. I made it to college, you know what I mean? Rest of the college, junior college, All American. But then when I figured if I could just add in hands, I could do it. These guys, I started watching these wrestlers, like, I could do it like this. And so I can punch people and not get arrested. All right. So I just
this is
kind
a
of,
great win.
this is
This
perfect.
is
So I just
fantastic.
kind of, yeah. But the issue was, there was no weights and no time limits and barely any rules when I started.
And barely
So
any
like I
money.
said,
There was like no
well,
money
no
back in the
money.
day.
Throw
You're
the
lucky
money
to get
part. Yeah.
$200. It was crazy.
I didn't even think. Well, I used to fight for free. I used to fight for videotape. When I tell everybody VHS to Blu-ray is my career, that's what it is. I mean, someone have that camera up on their shoulder, looking through the eye hole, and I remember, like I said, I remember one of my roommates were so zoomed in on my fight, all you can see is like two pairs of shorts. I'm like, oh, what? So then I had to just set up another fight. This guy was like 230 pounds the next weekend in the cage. So that because I used to fight for videotape. That's literally what I would fight for
What,
videotape.
what were you going to do with all the video? Just watch yourself, or are you just going to market
No,
yourself?
where I could send it. No, then to market. So I could send it out to, I mean, I kept hearing about Extreme Challenge and they had everybody
It's
out in
Monty
Iowa,
Cox's
like
promotion, right?
Monty Cox's promotion. They had all these fighters, Matt Hughes, Jeremy Horn, Pat Miletich, all these guys. And I could see that every one of them, then they would end up being in the UFC. And I was like, this is how we have to do this. And then because of that, I got a call. They're like, you know what? We're going to go to this Boss Shooting Invitational out in Colorado. And of course, John Peretti, the matchmaker for the UFC, this one was owned by SEG, um, was going to be the referee. And we're like, oh, well, this is the perfect opportunity for you to go out there. And so then we sent the tapes and, what I mean? And we made it in, we got invited to fight in this tournament. And so, well, I mean, we got to sign up, whatever it was. And so we went out there and I fought in front of John Peretti and I lost in the finals the first time, but I had to fight at 170. It was no time limit, and I mean, I beat this kid. I destroyed him. I beat him senseless. But he was next, you know, he got a heel hook, which I didn't even know what it was. I'm still in full on wrestling shoes. I had socks up to my calves. I looked like I was straight out of wrestling practice. I just took my t-shirt off, and he gets me in this heel hook. I was like, oh, wait, what is this? And I didn't know, you know. So I met him. He's like, all right, well, you need to go back. You need to work on your finishing. He goes, it's obvious you're well rounded. Because they was like, they just looked at me, and it was funny because my coach go, by the way, you need to show him you're well rounded, start punching. I was like, but I'm a wrestler. He goes, hey, you got to show him you got boxing. So I just started swinging, and I just fell in love with it. It's like, oh, this is awesome, you know. But point is, so I had to come back and do it again a few months later.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about how the sport has really evolved. I mean, you and I and a lot of the guys that you mentioned come from this time, like the time before time. I mean, there's no weight classes, tournaments, no time limits, and in so much of the sport was still like different organizations would have different rule sets. You had to figure out what was going on. Was it open palm here, and then you'd wear this here, and people were trying to. There was the Chicago Challenge where you wear a gi. I fought Jeff Curran in that actually. You wore a gi, and there was no striking on the ground, so it was basically a glorified jiu-jitsu match, but. Going back to wrestling, you know, one of the things you talked about is you got into wrestling, but there was like a really limited number of post-collegiate things you could do with wrestling. If you were a great athlete, you went and played baseball, man, maybe I would make the majors. You know, you could NBA, whatever the sport was, but wrestling at that time was kind of was like, well, what am I going to do when I'm done as a college wrestler? I'm going to go coach college ball. I mean, there's not really a tremendous amount of opportunities except for those guys that started to really pioneer the way, like the Randy Coutures and stuff. Now, I mean, we're seeing so many guys that are, I mean, people are training MMA at 6 years old now. It's the next level of people are going to be so freaking insane, bro, right? But now they're going into college with the intention that, hey, if I go to college and I wrestle, my out is the UFC. That is a viable career path. And, you know, back when it was back in the day, I mean, you fought in what UFC, was it 30 was your first UFC fight? Or what
22.
22. My goodness, man, that's crazy.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, so I was supposed to fight Spencer Fisher at UFC 60, and I remember that contract was 2-2, 4-4, 6-6. And for the people that are listening that don't know what that means, that's you get a win and a show bonus. So $2,000 was your guarantee if you showed up. Then you got an extra $2,000 if you win. And then when you have to get your medicals and stuff done, I mean, you could easily go into the UFC for your first contract, win all your fights, but after paying cornermen, coaches, and shit, you're upside down. You owe everyone money. It's crazy. There was no money in the sport back then. You had to fight for the love of it.
Yeah, well, and that was it. And it was just something to do. And like you said, that was the hardest part when it comes to wrestling. And I used to say, you know, I remember, you know, there's going to be kids out there watching us now. For the most part, most people would show up in the afternoons and train after work for maybe 2 hours, but they had their full-time job. And that's kind of, but I'm fresh out of college and I want to train all day. I'm used to waking up, you know, early and we'd have to all meet up and wrestle. We would do our running and our conditioning and everything for 2 or 3 hours. Then we'd have to go to classes, and then we come back and we were wrestling again in the afternoon until 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then, you know, day's over unless you have night classes. And this is kind of what I wanted to continue to do. And I still remember hanging with Bob Shamrock, may he rest in peace. I was down there in Lodi, and he says, yeah, I go, well, I'm going to go back up to Boise and, you know, and I'll just keep training up here for now because I miss all the wrestling. I missed the 2-a-days and stuff like that. And so he said, yeah, you know, he sent me back up to Idaho when I'd moved down to California with him. And then he just called today. I want you to go out to Iowa. I talked to Pat Miletich. I talked to Monty Cox. I think it'll be a phenomenal fit. And I go, but are you sure? And he's like, yeah, all right. And so here all of a sudden, I gave up. Now I'm sleeping on the couch in this place that used to be mine in Idaho. I moved everything down to Lodi, and now I'm back in Boise, which is 2 duffel bags. And Bob's like, well, why don't you go out there? So I left. When I tell everybody I left everything behind, I literally left everything behind. I got on a train for 2.5 days and went out to Iowa with those same 2 bags of clothes, dropped them and said, I'm ready to go. But when I got into that room and everybody was there at 9 o'clock in the morning and training until 12:30 in the afternoon, I was like, and then we were all coming back again at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, I was in heaven. I was like, oh, this is what I needed. So I was thankful that Bob Shamrock had the wherewithal to kind of pay attention to that and notice that I'm ready to go all day. But yeah, the sport back then, long story longer, the sport back then, people had full-time jobs and they'd only show up for a couple of hours, make sure they got done by 7 so they could get home, you know what I mean, have some food or whatever, get to sleep because they got to get up early and go back to work.
Yeah, I
If you were
remember.
getting in this sport for money, you was out your mind.
Bad decisions. Yeah, that's the people that I think accelerate in any athletic area do it because they just have a like you, they have that drive for the competitive factor. You're doing it for free. Now there's some money on the table. Guys see people with Nike ads like, oh man, this guy is making $50 million. There's a Conor McGregor who, Conor's an outlier, but at least that money's there, right? I mean, I remember watching. You'd have Rich Franklin come out for a fight, and it was like, here's Rich Ice Franklin. He's a school teacher, and it's like everybody had a full-time job, and this was kind of like that crazy sport they were trying on the side. So when you were training, was that with the Lions Den guys, or was that over in Des Moines, Iowa with Pat Miletich?
Well, when I was down in California in Lodi, it was Shamrock 2000. I'm not sure Ken and Frank, see, they weren't with Bob at that time, and he kind of set up his own thing. And so I was in Lodi for a little bit, training at Shamrock 2000, and then I moved out to the Quad Cities, and that's where I met Pat Miletich. It was a racquetball court. It was the most savage racquetball court I ever seen in my life. It was a racquetball court, mats on it, wall mats up about halfway. You could look over the top and look down like you was watching racquetball. It was literally, you had to go through the little cubby hole just to get into it, and it just became the mecca. I'd never seen anything like it. Wall to wall fighters just all day,
just beating the crap out of each other on the racquetball court.
Yeah.
What happened when somebody wanted to play racquetball? You guys were like, get that.
Well, no, they didn't have. Yeah, there was but that gym, that was the thing. That gym, they kind of rented out. They bought it. It was a racquetball court, and then areas, and they just used those as like the stretching room and this. And so Miletich had rented one of those little racquetball court areas, and that was the gym.
Yeah, I remember Pat was fighting in those Battle of the Masters fights back in the Midwest, way back in the day. That's like mid 90s. And then, so you hook up with Pat Miletich, and did you have any idea walking into that camp the level of tenacity and the names that would come out of the Miletich camp back then?
I knew, like I said, I seen Jeremy Horn, and to my knowledge, the biggest thing was when I watched him fight in the UFC, he fought Frank Shamrock, and he was beating him. He had him. Mm-hmm. But then Frank kind of fell in on that foot, and Jeremy just kind of waited. It was almost like if Jeremy was like, I shouldn't even be this far against the great Frank Shamrock. And then he ended up giving up that knee bar. But I was like, Jeremy had him. He was all over. He was just destroying him. And then just to learn about Jeremy Horn and, and stuff like that, and to see then the full contact fighter. See, that was the other thing. You remember the full contact fighter, the newspaper?
Sure.
And the reason why he made it a newspaper was because something about, obviously, if you do a monthly magazine, everything kind of has to be to print on that one day, and then it's whatever happens, it's too late because you had to have your whole layout was done and the magazine had to be printed and there was nothing you could do. And that's why he stayed newspaper, so he could try to stay with the times, and he could make changes. But everything, I remember reading the full contact fighter, seeing all these guys from Iowa, the Miletich team, the Miletich camp extreme challenge. And I was like, oh, I just can't wait to get out here and see all these people. And I just remember, because the first fight I got into, Matt Hughes. So my first fight in the UFC was Matt Hughes's first fight in the UFC. And we all kind of met together. And that was another thing. That's another massive long story. But Pat and Monty gave up their seats so that I could get on the plane and fly to Shreveport, Louisiana, so that we could drive over to Lake Charles, Louisiana for the fights. And they didn't want me to be, they're like, nah, we'll give up our seat so he can get in and weigh in and stuff like that. So it was, like I said, it was almost destiny to meet these guys. But seeing them all getting on the plane, I just remember like, oh, there's Jeremy Horn. Holy cow. You know what I mean? Like,
kind of fanboying out a little bit.
Yeah, I fanboyed. And then like the first time I got there, and there's Big John McCarthy. And you're looking up at him, and he's talking to you. You're checking your weight, and then to see Maurice and all these fighters that you'd watched on the UFC man, it was surreal. It was it was worth it just like that. But then to meet all them, and then like I said, to go out there and here I am training with them. I remember. I think the biggest thing was I knew that I had made a big step, even though I didn't know anybody out here, and I'm out here in Iowa. I showed up with 2 bags, but when I'll never forget this. When I got to the first day and I just seen all these people in there in the morning training, I just grin on my face. I'm like, yeah, I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
I finally found a place where they're going to train as hard as I want to train and as hard as we trained in college. It's like I found that gym, and that's where we kind of took off, and everybody kind of became names. But that was kind of the level that you needed to be at, and that just really tough, gritty, train all day long, in great shape, and and that's what we created, the Miletich fighting system.
Yeah, and back then there really weren't a tremendous amount of well-known MMA schools because the sport was evolving. Guys were still kind of figuring it out, and for a long time, Pat Miletich and the Miletich camp, they were just the most dominant. You were fighting, kicking everyone's ass. Tim Sylvia was fighting, kicking everyone's ass. So many guys came through there. What was a regular training day like there back then?
Well, and like I said, it was just a lot. Like in the mornings, we did a lot of, Tony Fricklin. I love this kid. I mean, he was one of my everybody. We just started running and lifting, and we would do all of our strength and conditioning in the morning. And then because we had free time, this is what was crazy. We would end up doing 10 or 15 rounds on the Thai pads, or we would wrestle or do jujitsu in the morning for another 2 hours. This is like our training sessions. We would show up about 9 o'clock, run, lift, do everything till around 11, and we were going till 1, and then we'd be done, and then we would take off and come back at after the Pat had his kid classes and stuff like that, and then about 7 o'clock at night we're in there for another 2 hours, and we would have these crazy sparring sessions and then still wrestle for an hour afterwards. It was just heaven to me, where we were just, and I kind of was that kid that we're running, lifting, getting in great shape, and then we just have to work on our techniques and grab the mitts, and have our pad classes, work on our Thai kicks, work on everything that we were doing in the morning, or and then it was all live sessions in the evening. And so we would have our 3-4 hours in the morning to work on everything that we wanted to work on, and then come back, and it was go time. The infamous sparring sessions and stuff, but the grappling and the was just as nuts. It was just as crazy.
Did you guys really beat the crap out of each other in those sessions?
We had the firm belief that, and I'll never forget it. If I'm going to experience the liver shot, or if I'm going to experience a deep leg kick, or what it's like to get rocked, it better have happened to me in practice. Otherwise, shame on all of you. You let me down, because I don't want it for the first time. I don't want to find out in a fight. And that was literally our kind of our belief. We were beating each other, forged in, we were iron forged in fire, so that no one else could ever do that. Our day off is fighting one of you, and we couldn't wait. We were literally trained that way. Here we are, a bunch of pit bulls beating each other up, and we couldn't wait until we got to find that fresh fish, or that to be able to go, oh, now I finally get to pound on somebody that's not Matt Hughes, Jeremy Horn, Tony Fricklin, Ben Earwood, Markey, all these guys. I don't want to say names because then I'll be dropping about 20 of them. Gabe Lemley, all these incredible, Jason Black, all these fighters that people didn't know, but in Monty's shows, we were just racking them up, and they were just killers, every one of them. And it was just survival of the fittest, more or less. And and it was just, now I get to go beat somebody up. And when we used to roll together as a pack, oh, we would just, yeah, we were a bunch of ruffians for sure.
So were the days that you guys were training, were they structured like it was wrestling for 2 hours, or was it
Yep.
just, hey, whatever we're doing today is what we're doing? Or how did you guys
No,
figure
we
out
were
that?
structured. We had our wrestling practice, always strength and conditioning in the morning.
Mhm.
And, and at one point, I don't even know if that was there in the beginning, but I got there and Jeremy Horn there, but I was like, well, I want to train in the morning. I go, we're here. I go full time. And they're like, oh, yeah. Jeremy's like, yeah, we got, and so we just started running practices in the morning. We had people that were running, lifting, and doing everything like that. Everything was structured. All of our strength and conditioning is in the morning, because that's what I remember when I was at Boise State University. We would do all of our conditioning and stuff in the morning, and then it was a heavy wrestling practice, 3 to 5:30, or 3:30 to 6, or whatever it was. We were wrestling, and that was just going live, but all of your conditioning, everything was in the morning. And we literally were the same way when we got there. Everybody did all the hard training and stuff in the morning, and everything was structured. We had grappling on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We had striking on Mondays and Wednesdays. We had basically MMA on Fridays, and then everybody would just show up on Saturday, and we were just kind of just a run amok and just MMA, just have MMA. But a lot of pad work, a lot of, was another good thing, because we had a lot of we had pad classes before we had the pro classes. And so it was a good time to just get in there and do the pad work with everybody else, and jump in with that. Everybody can do pad. So we were all in there doing Muay Thai, the pad work with and whoever showed up from off the streets and people that just wanted conditioning, and we would be in there with them, and then we'd shift over to the, to the fighters class, later on.
So what was that road like from the time you got to Pat Miletich's place? You fall in love. You got these great training partners, these great training sessions. You're digging your heels in. Was it you had to get a couple more fights in before you got the call up to the UFC?
Well, see, I was already in the UFC, and that's how I met everybody. So when I went to
Oh,
that
okay.
Boss Shooting Invitational, what happened was I was at the Boss Shooting Invitational, and I threw this kid all over the place. And John Peretti sat me down and says, "Look," he goes, "we just need to get you to be more well-rounded." He goes, "You got to be able to finish people when you get them hurt." He goes, "I want you to come back." And so I worked on it, and I came back a couple months later and fought in another Boss Shooting again at 170, and I just boom, just finished both of them real quick. Boom, boom. And he's like, "All right, here's the deal. I want to start this 155-pound division in the UFC." And he goes, "And you're gonna do it. I've got this kid. I want you to fight Alfie Alcarez. We're gonna do it at UFC 22." And he goes, "I want you both to weigh 155 pounds, but you're still gonna have to fight under the welterweight, the 170-pound weight class." Literally, that's like there was no 155-pound, and this is exactly to the T how the lightweight division started. People always say I'm not the godfather of the 155-pound division. Cool, then tell a story like this and let me know if you can match it. And so I said, all right, I'm in. And so that first UFC 22, I was on a plane flying out there. My friend Nate Pettit, who coaches down in Vegas now, he was my coach. And we rolled in from, and Lowell Anderson, I think he ended up fighting he fought John Lewis that night and at 170. And so next, I'm on a plane and flying out to UFC 22 to start this first ever 155-pound fight.
So what was that experience like when you were heading out there? Where was your head at? Excited,
I was just having
nervous?
fun. I was excited. Everything I did, I was excited. Everything was new. And when I got to show up there, what I mean? And there, like I said, I got on that plane. I don't know if we were in Louisiana or wherever we were getting ready to do that crossfire. But all of a sudden, I think it was Minnesota. We flew to Minnesota and went down or something. But all of a sudden, all of them get on this plane. And I seen Matt Hughes, but it's not, I was like, I didn't know who Matt Hughes was yet, but he was just a tank when he come on there, reading his books and stuff. And I'm just like, it's Pat Miletich, holy cow. You know what I mean? It's Jeremy Horn, holy cow. And I just sat there and did so, but that's kind of how I met everybody. And it's funny because it was almost like it was destined, because Nate Pettit used to live in Iowa. And when he came, so what happened was when I was doing the MMA at Boise, everybody wanted to show up and everybody wanted to train me and everybody was going to teach me how to fight, yada, 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 And so, because I did these Boss Shooting Invitationals and I got into the UFC and I was going to fight in it. And so people kept coming in like, "Oh, I want to train you." So I used to just turn them loose on the wrestlers. The wrestlers used to just, so they were kind of my median, right? The wrestlers and the coaches at Boise State University. My heavy bag is still sitting in the spot, the Jens Pulver heavy bag. Anyway, people would come in and the rest like, "Oh, here we have another one." And they're all wanting to come in here and train Jens. Well, this kid Nathan showed up, and I'll never ever forget this. One, to just walk into a room full of college wrestlers, you gotta have a sack on you.
That's a tough
And he
room.
come in and he just says, "I wanna work with Jens." And they're like, all the wrestlers going, "Oh, Jens, we got another one, got another
Lunchtime.
one."
Yeah.
Right. Well, he's like, "Another kid that's gonna come in and teach you how to quote unquote MMA." And I'm like, all right. So me and Nate kind of went at it. I'll never forget it. He tie kicked me across the thigh, shin pads on, and I went, "What in sweet?" Naturally, I beat the dust off him afterwards, but I was like, I go, "I want that." I go, "You got to teach me that. What in the hell was this?" Right. I'm like, "What kind of kick, what kind of sorcery did you just throw on me? This Charlie horse was something." And so I'm like, "You know what?" And so we brought him in. The wrestlers accepted him and we brought him into the fold and he became my coach. I go, "You have to teach me this." Ironically, where did he learn it all? Pat Miletich, Tarpons, out here in Iowa, where he is from. And he moved out to Boise. So he kept telling me from day one, "You got to go to Iowa. You got to go to Iowa. You got to go to Iowa." So he was constantly in my ear. So anyway, so he was with me when we went to that first UFC 22. And next, he sees Pat and he's like, and he was breaking down. They all knew him. And there's like, holy cow. So my world just shrunk in a heartbeat. Right. And so here I am. Now I'm going out to Iowa because he kept telling me he's got to get to Iowa. He got to get to Iowa. And so that's kind of how that whole thing predetermined messing with them. And yeah, so I mean, it was just meant to happen. It was meant to be.
So do you think being with Pat Miletich and having those guys in there just to sharpen iron on iron really changed the trajectory of your MMA career?
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew I was in the right place, and everything just kind of kept working. Everything just kind of kept going, but I knew I was in this spot, so I was happy, you know. But then I still had to work and make sure I paid bills, you know, and stuff. But I was in the right place. I was in heaven when it came to, again, training two times a day, and I knew that I could always fight in these extreme challenges because that's how I was going to get into. You know what I mean? Because you got to remember, the other thing was when I started fighting in the UFC, again, it was so small that we were allowed to fight elsewhere as well. So here I am going through the UFC and winning. And then, like I said, that one time I met Dean Thomas, another one. The day I stopped wearing shoes, Dean Thomas came in there and he caught me at the heel hook. Snap. It's like, oh, what in the? So I had to limp around and deal with that thing. You know what I mean? But so it's kind of like I said, it was, yeah, the sport was so small. Anyway, to go back to that first fight. So after that fight with Alcaraz, I got the win. 30 minutes later, they called it a draw. But they're like,
what? Why did they call it a draw?
I'm not
some weird
sure.
technicality or something.
Whatever it was, but to come back half an hour later and tell me that was a draw, I was like, well, my hand got raised on TV, so I'm okay with it. Whatever, you know, I'm good. But anyway, so that's kind of how it took off. And so to get back to it, that's how I got. They're like, well, we'll see again. But now I decided I'm going to move to Iowa, and I'm going to be fully 100% committed to fighting at that point. And I'll never forget this teacher. So I had a full-time job in Idaho after that fight, and I was going to be the head wrestling coach, and I was a resource officer right out of college. And I'll never forget what the principal said. Never, ever, ever, ever. In fact, she's the one she did this. So I went back after that fight and I won. I said, look, I have an actual opportunity to do this. And I'd met Miletich. I'd met everybody down in Iowa. I knew that's kind of where I wanted to go. But I was like, you know, I might actually become a world champion. This was a goal of mine forever. Like I'm pretty good at this fighting. And she said, look, Jens, I get goosebumps. She said, Jens, look, life is short, but your athletic life is a sliver. You got to go out there and you got to make all the stories because you can always come back and there'll always be kids at this age that are always looking for people like you, mentors like you, coaches like you, but you got to go out there and you got to fill your book. And that way you can always come back and share those stories. High five, handshake, big hug. Thank you very much. I'm on a plane. I'm out of here. You know what I mean? And that's when I moved down to California. And that's just a long story. But anyways, everything happened for a reason. And I'm on a train to Iowa to become a world champion.
So how many times did you really need to kind of subsidize, like we talked about, like you have to have a full-time job because the UFC wasn't paying you $500,000 a fight. What was that tipping point where you were able to finally comfortably go, you know what? I can take a step back from having to go do my 9 to 5 and I can just focus every minute of my day and my life into training and into being a world champion.
No, never. That's the thing. I lived poor and I trained and I took side jobs and things, you know what I mean, to continue. I didn't have, there was no, you had to make a choice, right? I wanted to just be 100%, but I believed in the sport and I wanted to see it grow and I knew it'd grow. But again, you got to remember when you started it, they didn't even have your weight class. It's kept alive on the underground forum, right? The underground forums on the internet. And, you know, the underground, it's like, it's banned on TV. It's legal in 3 states. I remember my mother looked at me and said, I can't believe you're about to do this. And she's like, you're giving up a job. You're giving up security. You're giving up retirement. You're giving up, you know, all these things. And I was like, look, but there's something above all the rest that I want to do. I mean, my goals, work with kids, be a wrestling coach, you know what I mean, be a mentor, but I also wanted to be a champion. And I also remember I had to get quote unquote famous so I could make this documentary so I could tell everybody what my father did to me, you know what I mean? And it's just, I had to do it. It wasn't about money. And like I said, I used to fight for VHS to Blu-ray as my career. I used to fight for free. But I had a story. I had to change my name because that was so I made a plug. But see, Bob Shamrock had said something when I went down there. I was like, I wanted to be adopted. I go, Bob, I want you to adopt me. I want to be a Shamrock. He did it for Frank. He did it for Ken. I want to be a Shamrock. I don't want to be Jens Pulver. My father's name is Jens Pulver. I don't want to be Jens Pulver no more.
How old are
And
you
he
at
says,
that
look,
point?
oh man, well, let's see, fresh out of college, 21,
Oh, the
right?
20s? Okay.
21 years old. And and I was like, I wanted to change it. And he goes, you're not going to change your name, but you're going to change your name. You're going to change what it means. And
Mm.
I just, all right, because Jens Pulver was an alcoholic, wife beating, child abuser in my world. And now Jens Pulver, hopefully, is a cool dad, you know what I mean, a good friend and a former UFC world champion and a mentor and a coach. So he just said, he goes, you're just going to change what it means. And so I held on to that for a long time.
So you're in the UFC under the guise of we're going to start this lightweight division. You're fighting at welterweight under the welterweight banner. What happened when there was that moment? All right, you're going to have an opportunity now. Here's the 155-pound championship. You're going to fight. It was Cara Uno, right? You fought for the belt?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Oh.
beat Cara Uno. Did that give you some sense of like, I finally made it, I'm at the top, or was that really just the opening of the can of worms?
No, it wasn't until the Ultimate Fighter. That's when, like, if you go back and watch my career and you see just the way I fought, I mean, I was a hellion. I was a tyrant. I mean, I fought, I was a buzzsaw. But when I did that Ultimate Fighter, even though I got clipped by Joe Lazone beforehand, um, I just wasn't the same. It just wasn't the same. But when I did that Ultimate Fighter, and the day that thing stopped filming, even my neighbors, they popped out. They're looking at me going, "That's you." It was a whole different kind of fame. See, even though I was the world champion, the sport was still small enough, right? It was when you could get it, we were culty, right? We were kind of a cult.
Sure.
And when you'd go to the UFCs and you had the hardcore fans, they knew who you were, but everyday individuals had no clue. They didn't like who is that. But you did that Ultimate Fighter, wow, and things changed.
Yeah, that really
big
was
time.
that was such a tipping point for the UFC because before that, right, there would be maybe 4 to 7 events on pay-per-view a year, and it was a smaller, a smaller group
tiny.
of guys, and people nowadays, like they ask me, oh, who are your picks for the fights this weekend? I'm like, man, it's hard to keep up. There's hundreds of
very hard.
guys. I mean, you've got fights every weekend. It's really turned into a crazy machine. And you talked about even looking at the hardcore fighter fans before the guys with their hardcore wearing tap out. They were wearing full contact fighter shirts and hats like way back in the day. You could always tell who the fans were. But yeah,
Oh gosh, yeah.
yeah, that first season of the Ultimate Fighter, that really brought MMA mainstream because up until that point, and really, I think that there was that whole, oh, it's human cockfighting. What is this crazy thing? You guys we look like animals. You're beating the crap out of each other. And it was always that pitted against, well, the narrative that it's modern day gladiator. And I think now it's people have said, okay, now that it's a sport and it's a way to make money and the athletes are more respected. What are some of the biggest takeaways, having been in the sport for so long, that you see the UFC today from the UFC 22 that you were at?
Well, it's real simple. No matter how hurt you were back then, you fought because you got one. You were lucky to get 2 opportunities a year. Here they are. They're only doing 6, 7 shows. And when Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta and Frank Fertitta, when they bought the UFC and we got into Atlantic City and stuff like that, we were like, oh, this is a big step up from where we were, and we knew we were going on that right path. But you can only fight once or twice a year, and it wasn't. And I think that's the one thing I love now. Literally, like you see Shimaev and stuff like that, where he just never even left the island. He's like, I'll fight next weekend. I just smashed this kid. I'll fight next weekend. And you've got it, like you said, you have a UFC every weekend. You can now have full on careers. Like Jeremy Horn used to fight every weekend.
Yeah.
And
Guy's got zillions fights.
And yeah, he's not
Crazy.
like that. There's other people that have big records, but they used to call their fights in. Jeremy Horn legitimately fought in a different show almost every weekend, and legitimately, he didn't go to his gym and spar 3 of his friends, beat them up, and call them in as wins. He legitimately fought every single weekend, and it was crazy. No matter what the level of the pay, no matter what, he just wanted to stay active, and he's the one who kind of showed me that. But now in the UFC, because it's so busy, you could literally have 6, 7, 8 fights a year. I mean, if you can go without being injured, you could turn right back around. That's what I love now, the turnaround. You can fight in 2 weeks from now if you're healthy and ready to go again. And to me, that's, yes, the money's gone up. The sport has just turned massive, but that to me is still the one thing that I hold that I'm just amazed by, that you all get this opportunity now. You can literally fight every month. If you can go out there and finish somebody and you're ready to go, you could literally fight again in a month. And that's what I love, the amount of fights the UFC has. And as somebody who works for Twitch TV/UFC, I'm breaking down the fights every weekend. You know what I mean? I'm breaking down fights, doing interviews for people doing the new Dana White Contender Series. I'm meeting kids coming out. I mean, look at these platforms that you have. And I mean, of course, you've got other shows, but I work with the UFC now, and that's what I love is there are just so many fighters, and there are so many fights. I love it because I came from that era where you were lucky to get 6 a year, 6 shows a year, let alone fight once a year.
Yeah, yeah, and also now that they have some, some people loved or they hated the Reebok deal. And I guess it kind of depended on where you were at in that food chain, because 95% of the money was going to the top 2 or 3 guys in every division, or a guy like a Conor McGregor who was just came in and was just running his mouth and would back up those fights. It took me a while to become a Conor McGregor fan, to be honest. When he fought Jose Aldo, I was like, oh, this isn't a good matchup for him, because Jose is a world class black belt, has great counter punching, great striking, great leg kicks, and man, Conor just starched him. But I feel like it's easy to discount those fights when a fight ends in 3 seconds. You're like, nah, was that a fight? When you look back, do you think that if Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, both in their prime, fought 100 times, how do you think that goes?
No, well, here's the thing I loved about that fight with Conor McGregor, and this is a fact. To have that kind of confidence, and I say it all the time on my stream, is to have that kind of confidence and to stand there and know your game plan, know your left, and know this raging Brahma bull is coming right at you. This is the Jose Aldo that had been on a 10-year can't be beat streak of just crushing everybody. So you've got this Brahma bull rolling straight at you exactly the way that he does, lunging in, and you watch Conor waits the timing, and just hits him with a split. It's 100% confident that I get goosebumps in it. It's 100% confidence in his power. And that's what I've always loved about Conor McGregor, was that moment right there. The fact that he could sit there and this Brahma bull was coming straight at him. And my man just waited, patience, bang, and he just blitzed him. He would do it every single time. He built him up. He got him fired up. And ironically, here's this kid with this massive winning streak. And he walked in there with the antsiness. He walked in there with that uncontrollable urge to just jump out and try to finish somebody early. And it was the veteran mind of Conor McGregor, the belief in Conor that he has in himself, in his camp, in his training, in what he does, to sit back and, I mean, this hand is literally flying right by him. And you watch when he throws the left, the glove just brushes right by him. To stand in the pocket like that, as somebody like that is coming at you and throwing that punch, the magnitude of that, at least as a fighter, me watching it, I was like, that's how incredible Conor McGregor is. That's the kind of fight, that's the kind of person that he is. He believes, and it goes back to the way that he sells everything, but he backs it up because he believes in himself. He's not just out there trying to sell himself. He legitimately believes in himself and has confidence in what he does. And that's when I was like, yep, I'm a massive Conor McGregor fan. I was before just by the crowd support, which was mind-blowing. But for him to stand in there and do that at that moment, there's not a fluke moment about that. That was sheer confidence. That was sheer absolute belief in what he can do. And then, of course, the just monstrous power that he had in his left hand. And literally that glove as a wisp just blows right by him. It was something.
Yeah, he did hit him with just surgical precision. But
it's the way that he timed it. And it was the way, and it was short, compact. And like I said, Jose's missile is coming. This thing is on its way. And here's this sniper waiting. I need my shot. And it's literally coming in, boom. And then it just kind of brushes by. You go back and watch it like I have, breaking it down on the stream and stuff on the streams and stuff like that. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing, and he had to goad him in. But then you go back to the mind games that he played up to that point, that he had Jose Aldo so pissed off, so mad, that he just he didn't walk out there as the man who was on his 10-year winning streak. He walked out there as, I'm going to just kill this little kid. I'm going to kill this little kid. I'm going to kill him.
You think Conor really just got into his head and that affected his performance?
You know he did.
For sure.
Of course he did.
Yeah, he's great because he talks a lot of shit and he backs it up. I mean, you can't You can't say I'm going to knock somebody out in the first round, and then you knock them out in the first round. You do that 2 or 3 times, and you start calling your fights. It sets a high bar. But I think right now, and I want your opinion on this, a lot of people are looking at Conor McGregor, and they're kind of questioning, where is he at in his career?
Well, where is he? Come on, look at what he has done. Look where he came from. Look what he started, and look at what he has created. That's got to be tough. You know what I
Sure.
mean? It's got to be tough. He's got to enjoy himself, but he is still, he's kind of, I mean, think about, he has created, everybody's trying to do these super fights. People are like, they'll put their title on hold. And we've have interim champions left and right because people are like, well, I want to get one of these super fights. I want to
Yeah, I
do
want the
something like
BMF
this.
belt now.
I
Fuck the
want that
UFC's title
BMF belt.
belt.
See, and that's exactly that. Hey, get back to that BMF. I still think that, excuse me, that is something later. If they really utilize something like that, the BMF belt, that's kind of how we could get a Pro Bowl thing kind of going, where you could almost one time, end of the year, pick these highlighted fighters from the different organizations. And this would give you that opportunity to kind of have that cross promotion type fight where you're not holding up UFC titles, you know what I mean? Because, man, these kids are still they're climbing those ladders to get to that UFC belt. And then when you get to that level, you know what I mean? Now you could probably give up that belt. Now let's set up these BMF fights where now you can kind of pick your weight, catch weight. If you're a big enough name, you can start doing that and still let these kids dream, let these youngsters climb their way up, let them go get that UFC title. But this way, when you get to that next level, you know what I mean? You get that that new kind of fame, use the BMF as your belt. That way you can go out there and just start doing these Pro Bowl type matches and you can fight the best of this organization, the best of this. Kind of like, you know, I mean, we do the Pro Bowl at the end of the year with the NFL and stuff like that. Same kind of thing. If you, that BMF belt opens up a lot of situations and scenarios where you could kind of, we could do a catch weight, we could do cross promotion, we could do all kinds of things. But you know what I mean? It's not holding up where you've got people fighting for the interim belt, then the interim belt's got to wait for the title guy to get ready, then the title guy gets ready, then we finally get to have this fight 2 years later where the interim champ gets to be the actual champ, and you know, all these poor kids climbing the ladder, you're stuck waiting 3 years before you get your opportunity because these belts are on hold. But this way, you can just kind of dip it off to the side. All right, fight for that. And when you get to that next level, we're going BMF belts all day.
When you were fighting in UFC, did you feel like there was a lot of politics involved with matchmaking, or did you feel like it was a more of a grassroots, hey, if I keep fighting and I win, I'm in control of my future?
Whoever they put in front of me, I just wanted to run them over.
That's one of it. Just crack skulls and
well, but you know, and yeah,
checks.
but see now, I think there are reasons, there are availabilities, there are moments when it does pay to wait. It does pay if you got that shot for that belt. That's a different level. I mean, I hear it about it, but it's like you get into that title fight. It's a whole different pay scale. It's a whole different ordeal. Then you get into title defenses. It's a whole different pay thing, right? Back in the day, they're like, what? No, this was your contract was your contract. It didn't matter. You just fought to, you know, I mean, you're fighting, and who you fought is whoever they told you to. But now you are getting to that level, and that's the beautiful thing I love about, you know, the UFC especially is, you know, it's just such a monster, and it's so much fun. And like I said, the availability to fight every weekend if you wanted to. Oh, it makes me wish I was 25 and I could do it all again. I would try to fight every weekend if possible. Shimiev, I'd be like him. I'm not leaving. I'll just stay on the island and try to fight 3 times in this month, and then I'll be back. You know, tell the family I'll be back in a month. I'm going to fight 3 times, and then I'll take a break for a month.
How do you know when to take a break for good? I think that's something that athletes at every level struggle with. Like Aaron Rodgers has retired a couple of times. A lot of fighters, I think yourself, you've retired and got back in there. Is it just?
No, I never got back. I
No,
kept talking. Well, I kept talking
about
about it, but I never made a. You know, I mean, like this is it for me because I was going through that losing streak. I'm like, this is it. I'm done with this. I can't keep doing this. You know, and then it was something simple, and I never actually said anything. I just quit. I was just done. But I had retired verbally a few times after a couple of fights, and you know, stuff like that. But I think what it boils down to when people retire, and you know, because we just were talking about Condit, by the way, yesterday on the Twitch TV/UFC stream, and we were breaking down his fights. And I think what happens is, even though when people leave, they think they're done, but then all of a sudden, they start to realize how short time itself is. Like, man. And all of a sudden they think about that, and then they're like, you know what? This athletic life, nope, I want to get back in there. I want to get back in there. You know, athletically, they're like, all right, you know, I'm done for a while. But then you realize after you retire athletically, you realize there's only one more retirement. That's when we all meet our maker and we all go into the, you know what I mean? We pass on. And that starts to hit people at a certain age, like, no, you know what? No, I don't want to be done yet. I don't want to be done. I think that kind of goes into watching these and the whole YouTube idea of these fights where people kind of put on these exhibitions and stuff like that. I'm a fan of it, but I think that's just what happens. People are just understanding now, it's like, oh, they have a hard time when they walk away from the sport and then they realize life is short. I may never, this might be real. I may never get back to this. And then you see people kind of want to get back in there. And even now you see people in their 40s. I think that's another thing. We were all led to believe that 40 was that death sentence. Once you hit 40, that's it. You're done. You can't do it. But now, like at 45, I'm like, man, I feel good. Who in the hell told me that 40 was too damn old? I don't know. Who told me 38 was too old? I don't remember. But it's like whoever they were, they must have, I feel bad for them because 38, I felt gangster. 45, I feel incredible. I feel good. Like I feel stupid. I run every day, 6, 8, 10 miles, depending on the day. I lift. I feel great.
I wonder if there's some sort of a play to have like almost like a division, like a masters division or something, like to put on those super fights because there's so many guys.
That's what happens. That's what the beautiful thing about YouTube is. The YouTube does it. Then let the Paul brothers, Jake and Logan Paul. I don't care what anybody says. You can say what you want about them, but they have literally almost taken over combat sports.
Sure.
You can't go into a big UFC, a big boxing match, and no matter what you do, you hear their names. And why? Because we are now at an era where you can, whatever you are good at, whatever you want to be the best chef in the world, you can go out there and start doing YouTube videos. You want to be the best, anything, whatever it is you want, like podcast or streamer or whatever it is, you have the ability to go out there. And if people love it, they'll watch it and they'll show up. And now you can do out there with YouTube, especially, you could literally put a ring up in your backyard, charge $9 for whatever it is for the pay-per-view, box 3 of your friends. And if people want to watch it, done so. You know what I mean? But so now you have this opportunity, and that's the idea is you don't have to be done just yet. You can go out there and do it. Now, rules and things is different, but people that still want that opportunity, right? That still want to be able to go out there and box and stuff. That's what you're seeing when Tyson did it, Roy Jones did it. You know what I mean? People just going out there and moving around. Obviously, the rules are going to be a little different, but fighting people your own age, I'm for it. I'm for seeing people want to be able to do this. It's like, why do we have to, we all have to die twice as an athlete, right? The athlete dies at a young age and we all meet our maker. But if you want to get out there, who is to tell you that you can't? And I'm a fan of it. And they're like, oh, but you might get hurt. Well, you know what? Some people are hurting every day that they can never do what they've been doing since they were a kid. Some people are hurting daily that they don't get to do what they love. And so how are you hurting? Mentally, physically, what?
Yeah, well, Holyfield just came out of retirement and fought Vitor Belfort, and a lot of people
didn't look good.
Yeah, but a lot of people gave him shit because he got starched pretty quickly.
Of course. But his balance was off, his equilibrium was off. Not to cut you off, he just looked bad. And yes, there is obviously a time where if you still want to compete, that's why. Hey, I love esports. You know what? Get good with the sticks, and you can still do the virtual boxing all day. It's still up here. Now you just gotta roll the hands to move around, get that VR headset on. But that's why I'm a fan of, gaming, because you can go out there. I was at TwitchCon and I went out there and gamed one time, 100 other people getting up on that stage. And I was just like, I freaked out, but I still got that rush. You know what I mean? I'm
that
just
adrenaline dump that you miss.
That adrenaline. And I think
it's addictive.
That's what they're kind of after. It is. And it's just, but the other thing is what's more addictive than that is people still giving you their time. And the one thing I always talk about when I'm streaming, and I thank everybody every day for what they do, is because I'm always at Twitch TV/James Pulver. I stream every night. And the one thing is people are giving me their time. And I think that's what I missed, feeling relevant. People at one point not only would they give you their time, they would wait in line just to meet you. And then you hear people all the time. Then one day it's just crickets, quiet, gone. There's nobody around. And I think people miss that. They miss that part of their life, right? And they've got to figure out, how do I get that back? I just want to go out there and experience the crowd again. I want everybody to be excited to see me. I want everybody to be excited, like, holy cow, it's Chance Pulver. They get to run up and give you a high five, and you miss that, right? So the fact that people come into the stream and they give me their time, I tell them every day, that's been the biggest lifesaver for me, is people still giving me their time. And that is, like I said, money can't buy it. We always wish we had more. And the fact that people will sit there and hang with me for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it's the most incredible gift in the world. And I think that's what we tend to miss, is when things start to get quiet it's hard. You'll see people that were out there in the reality shows and things at one point, and then they don't have it anymore. So they got to keep trying to do some kooky shit, pardon my language, so they can get relevant again, so they can get into the media, so they can get their name mentioned. Where you have a lot of people, they don't want their name mentioned at all. They're not used to it. But those that are used to hearing about it, reading themselves in the tabloids, stuff like that, I got to get out there. I got to do something. And people will read that and give me their time again. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is people want to just relive those moments because you get to be relevant. And it's a weird feeling, but I'm sure anybody that's had that, it's people giving you their time is, I think, the biggest. It's addicting, and it's an incredible gift. And if you're fortunate enough to continue to do something where people will still do it, more power to you.
Aside from the UFC's Twitch channel, what's the social media platform if people want to give Jen some of their time that they can find you on the most frequently?
Oh, at Jens Pulver on Instagram. That's my boo. That's my favorite. I deleted it. Ironically, see, that's again one of those times where back in the day, I don't know, I had 100 and some odd thousand followers. It's like 5, 6 years, 7 years ago, and I deleted it. I don't even know how long ago. It was a while back, and I deleted it. I'm like, I don't want all this, man. Too much attention. I'm done with it. I can't. I got to just kind of sit in this cubby hole. I can't be around all this. The mean people suck, and I don't want to be around them. So I just got to kind of turn it off. And now I'm back, and so I'm rebuilding, and it's quality over quantity, but I love it. So at Jens Pulver on Instagram is definitely where you'll find me the most. And of course, Twitch TV/Jens Pulver is where I'm at, 7 p.m. Central, pretty much every night. I'm not on the UFC stream, and we're just breaking down fights and watching the things and passing on knowledge.
Man, well, I appreciate you coming on. And guys, check out Jens Pulver on Twitch. Check out his Instagram page. Watch some of his fights. And if you want to see where the UFC badasses started, guys like Jens having the trilogies with BJ Penn are some of the most prolific fights, I think, in the UFC's history. So, Jens, I appreciate it, man. We'll stay in touch, brother.
It. All right, y'all be good. Be good.
Take care.
Later on. All right.
Hey, guys, thanks for listening to the Jason Chambers podcast. And if you like what you're seeing, please give us a big thumbs up, subscribe, turn on alert notifications. It helps with this YouTube algorithm that we're trying to figure out to bring you more awesome content. Leave me a comment. I'll make sure to write back. Thanks for the feedback, guys.